Say it again.
Do you mind forwarding?
The link? Sure. Got it. Just click on the webpage. I'll promote you. I think everyone's in. Oh, yep, 4. Down 1. Oh, we can't hear you, Anna.
I was just asking Solomon if you're staff support for tonight.
One more time.
Are you staff support for tonight? Are you our go-to?
Yeah, I'm good. I'll be here.
Well, thank you. Thank you. All right. We have everyone. So I am going to open the Ravenswood City School District Board of Trustees special meeting of October 29th, 2020 at 5:02 p.m. And I will take roll call. Trustee Gaona Mendoza.
Here.
Trustee Shabomahin.
Here.
Trustee Wilson.
Here.
Trustee Polito, present. A quorum is present. So we will now move to the first item, which is the approval of the agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Through the chair, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
President Polito,
Aye.
Vice President Wilson,
Aye.
Trustee Gaona,
Aye.
Trustee Shabomahin.
All right, quorum is present. Thank you very much. So I would like to start off this meeting by thanking everyone for making time in their schedule to schedule this really important meeting. As everyone already, well, as most people already know, Trustee Fitch at our last board meeting announced her resignation of her position as a trustee. And we immediately reached out to County Council about next steps. And a part of those next steps was for us to meet tonight and convene and hear our legal counsel, John Niblin, share with us what is the process, our options, and the timeline that we have to work within. And once he presents, then we will be following up with the board discussion as how we move collectively regarding this matter. So I will now hand it off to legal Niblin, present to the board.
Thank you, Trustee Polito. As has just been mentioned, you had a resignation of one of your trustees at, I guess, effectively October 22nd. I believe that was the date of your last meeting. And so the education code, particularly section 5091 of the code, sort of gives you two options in the context of a vacancy that occurs on your board, at least as relevant to the current circumstances and kind of where you are in the calendar. Specifically, you can do one of two things, and you've got 60 days to decide which of these two things you want to do and to actually make it happen. And you can either call a special election to fill the vacancy that's been created, or alternatively, if you don't call an election, you can make a provisional appointment to fill the vacancy. I'll explain for a minute why it's called a provisional appointment. But those are your two options, and you have to do and actually get done one of those two things, again, within 60 days of the date of vacancy. So you're really talking about roughly mid-December that you've got to have this done by. If you don't take any action at all, what ends up happening is the county superintendent of schools will call an election. If you let 60 days pass without taking one of those two actions I just described, the superintendent of schools for the county will call an election to fill the vacancy. I want to talk for a couple of minutes about the election option. So if you decide that you wanted to fill this vacancy through election, what would happen is that an election would be set, once you all call it, for the next established election date, which is at least 130 days after the vacancy occurs. So by my math, you'd probably be looking at somewhere in March-ish to have a special election. Now, I want to be really clear that if you go that route, which is again a legitimate route under the education code, the school district bears the cost of that election. I did a little quick checking to try to get a sense of what it might cost to do a special election, assuming you all would want that information, and made contact with my colleague who represents the elections office. And I've been told that it would probably be somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000 to do that. So,
Wait,
and the election is, it's a bit of it's a little bit of an order of magnitude thing. I can't really give you a specific dollar amount. And the cost of an election really turns on the area covered, the number of electors, the number of people who vote in the jurisdiction, and frankly, what else is on the ballot. And in a matter like this, given that we'll have just had a general election in November, there probably wouldn't be anything else on the ballot for you all to share expenses with. So this would be kind of a full freight thing for the district. It looks like Trustee Wilson maybe had a question.
Trustee Wilson, we're going to hold our questions to the end of his presentation, if it's okay. Thank you.
Okay. So in any event, if you wanted to go that route, we can again, sort of talk more about some options, some of the nuances of all that. If you wanted to go that route, the staff would work with, the board president, of course, and we'd work through a district administration to coordinate with the chief elections officer in the county to make that happen. And again, the second alternative that I suggested was available under the education code was to make a provisional appointment. And this, just as it sounds like, involves the board ultimately picking somebody who applies through an application process to serve the remainder of the term of the person who resigned. So you'd be talking about making a provisional appointment of somebody who would serve through essentially December of 2022, given that there were 2 years that were remaining on Trustee Fitch's term. Now, the law itself, the education code is a little bit, it doesn't go into any detail as to how you go about making a provisional appointment, but you all have adopted a board bylaw 9223, that provides you with some of the framework that you would apply in this situation. The first thing that 9223 of your board bylaw says is that you're going to, in a situation like this, direct your staff to undertake reasonable outreach, good outreach, everything, things that you can do to sort of maximize the number of applications you might get from people in the community. So you'd be making contact with local media, for example, posting something on your website to encourage applications. And then what you would do, pursuant to your bylaw, is appoint a subcommittee. A subcommittee would involve 2 members to review candidate applications, perhaps actually work on sort of the content of the application itself on the base, given, guidance that you all might provide, this evening if you decided you want to go this route, but to develop an application, review those applications in the first instance to ensure that whoever applies actually meets the basic criteria. And if you all want to talk about it, I can go into the details as to what the criteria are, but that would be the idea. And then those applications of folks who are eligible would come back to you all at a meeting, a special meeting or a regular meeting, where you would actually do interviews in a public meeting context, where you'd interview the eligible applicants and you'd ask all of them sort of the same questions and hear public comment, have your own discussion, and ultimately coming out of that process, you would make a provisional appointment. And I was mentioning that it's called a provisional appointment, and it's called a provisional appointment because even after you've made that appointment, you've got to let the public know that you've made the appointment, and the public then has the opportunity, if they were for whatever reason wanted to do something different from the appointment that you made, they could petition for an election. Now, there's a certain number of people in the district who would have to actually sign a petition to make an election happen, but that's at least a possibility. If that election didn't take place, that appointment would remain in effect until, again, December of 2022. So I know I've kind of zipped through that relatively quickly, and I've maybe glossed over some of the finer points of it, but I'm happy to entertain any questions or elucidate on any of the matters I've kind of touched on.
Thank you, John. Trustee Wilson, I think, was the first to have a question, so I'll give her the floor to do any follow-up.
Yeah, I was actually very shocked to hear that it's for $100,000. When I was on the council and we did a special election, it was far less than that. The other thing is that, as you mentioned, the assumption would be that we would be the only ones putting something on the ballot, which is not necessarily valid, because there will be other possibilities around the county, because couldn't it be that other cities also, or other agencies also could put something on the ballot, or whether the ballot would just be for us, okay? So that's the first thing. The other thing is just because of the special thing. So you mentioned that if the board makes a provisional and the public decides that, oh, we don't like that appointment, and they petition for an election, who pays for that election?
The district.
So we would have to pay for that one too.
If an election
Okay.
takes place, regardless of how the election actually takes place, the district would be responsible for the cost. And to your earlier point, I guess it's possible that there might be other things on the ballot, but to be clear, if there were something in South San Francisco, for example, really would be concerned about a matter that actually had sort of jurisdictional contacts, right? The idea is, would there be something happening in the city of East Palo Alto or something happening county-wide where it might touch on us? And I was just sort of hypothesizing without, I guess you're right. I mean, no, you definitely are right. I mean, I was kind of hypothesizing that given that we'll have just have had a general election in November, it's relatively unlikely there'd be other folks who'd be looking to do an election on such a short turnaround from that November date.
Well, it's interesting because I actually just had that discussion yesterday with that's why I brought it up. Because there is some talk in the community about putting something on the ballot for March, and they're investigating also what the costs are. However, that's not my position. I just want to get clear about that. That's all.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, other questions from the board regarding anything that our council presented on, or something that he did not cover that you have a question about regarding either method or process?
Through the chair, I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you for that presentation. And I have one question about, you mentioned basic criteria for potential candidates in the application process. Who determines that criteria, and what is the criteria?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question. Yeah, the criteria are actually set in the education code. So the education code itself, sort of defines who can actually serve. And in order to serve as a member of the Board of Trustees, you have to be a registered voter, and you have to reside within the jurisdictional boundaries of the Ravenswood City School District. So that would, those are maybe two things. You have to be at least 18 years of age. I guess this ties into being a registered voter. You have to be a citizen of the state. And then I guess another kind of unique thing is that you can't be both an employee of the district and a trustee on the district. So that's more of a disqualifier than a qualifier. But those are the basic criteria.
Gotcha. So to be clear, there are no other criteria that then the district could add or board members could add. You just go with the regular criteria that you just laid out.
Yes, ma'am, that's right. I mean, it's not to say that you can't, in your own application process, decide that there are things that are important to you, maybe PTA membership or things like that, but those aren't eligibility criteria. Those are just more factors that you might consider in determining whether or not somebody was a strong candidate.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you for that good question. Anyone else have any questions or comments about the process? Okay, so I would like to do something. Normally, we have a presentation, then the board discusses, and then we have public comment. But given that we've given the board time to ask questions before we walk through what we decide to do, I think right now is the best time to hear from the public. as we go in and deliberate what are the options we're going to take, rather than at the very end of it when we've already gone through this long discussion. So I will ask the public, if you are interested in speaking, you will have 2 minutes to speak. And please raise your hand so that our IT director, Solomon Hill, can identify you and bring you into our panelist side and allow you to speak before the board.
We have one speaker so far. That's Rhonda White. Rhonda, I'm promoting you. And after that, Antonio Lopez will speak.
Good evening, board, superintendent, family, staff, community, and all that good stuff. I won't go long. I just wanted to ask a couple questions. I'm just wondering if before you go into closed session, if John, who did a great job on delivering, just gives a recap of the two provisions again. But my biggest question, or one of the questions, is where would the funds come if there was a special election? I know that they come from the district, but where would the funds come from? Is there a special fund for that, or is that general fund? That's one. And then if we do an application process, is that a majority board vote, or is that a consensus? And who would make that decision? Is that clear? Okay. Those are the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. John?
Yes, Trustee Polito, if you wanted me to go ahead and address those, I'd be happy to address both those questions. And actually, I'd have to defer actually to the superintendent with respect to whether or not there's a particular fund that's been identified to deal with this. I could state as a matter of law, there isn't any particular source of special funding that's available for elections. My suspicion that it would be that we'd be looking at general funds, but again, that's more in the nature of a suspicion than knowing for sure. The other question actually is another very good question about how the application process works. It's based on a majority board vote. In order for the board to take action to appoint a trustee provisionally, you need a majority vote. So you need three votes of the currently configured board to take action. If the board were unable to garner 3 votes, that would be in more than 60 days past, then you'd be in a situation ultimately where the board had failed to take action, and the county superintendent of schools then would call an election. So that's how that would work.
And Superintendent Sidaria, I've never seen an allocation for a special election in our fund budget. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's correct. And we're actually about to balance our budget and present the first interim, and that there's no place where $400,000 for an election has been allocated.
So technically, if we were put in a position of having to do an election, it would come out of the general fund.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. All right. We have a second speaker, I believe.
Yes, Antonio Lopez, you should be promoted in a second.
Please.
He dropped off for a second.
President Polito, would we want to clarify what happens if the county superintendent takes action and who funds that?
So if we cannot come to a decision amongst us, the decision will be taken out of our hands and into the county's hand, who will call an election, and we will still have to pay for the bill, even if the county calls the election. So we will be financially committed to the decision whether we make it or the county makes it.
Antonio? He disappeared for a moment. Antonio, can you unmute and speak? There you are. Can you unmute?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Now we cannot hear you. I think your connection might be going up and down. Yeah, Antonio, we can't hear you, unfortunately.
All right. Solomon, do we have any other speakers?
Rhonda White has raised her hand again.
Well, I'm pretty sure everyone's allowed to speak once, but since she didn't take her whole 5 minutes, I'm sure we could hear her remaining comments. One thing I wanted to address from Rhonda White's comments is, and it's because she's our RTA president, our union president, which is why she's usually allowed an extended amount of time to the other speakers, but she asked if we could report out from closed session. This discussion tonight is all in open session. The whole process will be in open session. When we interview, it'll be an open session. And when we deliberate and vote, it'll be an open session. Because it is not a personnel matter, it will remain in open session unless our legal counsel does additional research or some new policy comes up that tells us otherwise. We did ask that question, and that's why I felt a need to respond to, I believe that was one of your 3-part question.
Thank you. That helps me a lot because I was trying to figure out what's behind closed doors, what's not, what's in public. So we right there. And I forgot to say, I am the president of the Ravenswood Teachers Association, which does allow me a little more time to speak. I just want you to know is when you're queuing people in and out to become speakers, we can't hear what's being said. So if we get kicked out, if we ask a question, we get kicked out. If the conversation begins, I miss it. Or if I'm going back, I can't hear. So I just want you to know is if whoever's speaking doesn't get to stay here, then whoever is going to answer the question or talk should give a little pause so that we can get kicked out and get back in the cycle so that we're able to hear.
Good point. What do you think the delay is, Rhonda? About 5-10 seconds?
Yeah, I would say maybe about 10 is good. Yeah, because I was like, ooh, John said something. I don't know what he said. Man, Anna just said something. Shoot, I missed it again. Dang it.
The first things we talked about was the budget, Rhonda, and the budget. There is no allocated budget for this, so it would have to come out of our general fund.
I got that piece. Yeah, it was I just didn't know. I had asked if he just would review the 2 processes again very quickly so I could hear them. And then I didn't know if he had did it really quickly. And then I was like, did I miss it again? Dang it. Okay, right. That was it.
So the one of the process is having a new member by an election, which we would have to determine and decide and have on a ballot. That was one option. And it would be at a cost to the district. And the research showed that it was anywhere between 400,000 in that range, unless there's other people putting other things on the ballot at the time we are, and we share the cost. And I believe the second option that he shared was an appointment, which would be provisional. That because after we appoint somebody, the community has a certain amount, we have to make the announcement, the community has a certain amount of time to potentially challenge it, and they have to get a certain amount of voters to support that challenge in order to call then an election. So that would automatically take us to an election. Not deciding would take us to an election, and then we have an opportunity to go to an election. And all those 3 options of election will be on our dime. So I just wanted to be clear.
Yes, thank you. That's very clear. And I think anybody who joined late or didn't hear it all or missed it, or is like me, a little slow, the repeat was great.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Thank you.
Chair, then I have that actually makes me come up with another question. How much time, I'm sorry, you said that the community could, or the public could say, okay, no, we don't like that appointment, and circulate a petition. How much time? What's the timing on that?
30 days.
So 30 days after we make the appointment, they can challenge it.
That's right.
Okay.
Days within, that's a period in which you would have to bring the a sufficient number of signatures, and I believe it's 1.5% of the electors of the district. If you get that many signatures within 30 days and present them to the county superintendent of schools, that would trigger an election.
So it gets presented to the county's board, not us?
The county superintendent. I mean, it would you would effectively be in the know because the
We'd
county
be notified.
let us know that they received it. But that's the technical place where the signatures are supposed to be submitted.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So that takes us now to board deliberation. And we've heard from public comment. So we're going to move into the discussion of how we would like to proceed. So the first part of a couple parts for us to determine is going to be the method. What is the board's pleasure as to how we will be able to designate who will be filling in for trustee Fitch's vacancy? So the option is an election or a provisional appointment, and I would like to hear from the board.
Through the chair, provisional appointment for me.
Thank you.
And I could go next. I will go for provisional appointment too, because we cannot afford that money. That money can be used, it's a lot of money, in something else that goes directly to our students.
And through the chair, likewise, I say provisional because we can't afford it.
And I am supportive of that. So that makes that that is addressed. Great job. We got to that fairly quickly. So that takes us to the next part. Part of board policy says we will create a subcommittee to oversee the process. And that would include establishing and finalizing an application, making sure that a press release and the notifications are happening, because part of our board policy says that we are going to advertise in the media. We really want to be able to get the word out far and wide. And then we would screen applicants, or the subcommittee would screen applicants and determine who meet criteria or any factors that the board designates that are also going to be important and considered. So we are now going to move to appoint committee members. And I would like to know who would be interested in serving so we can deliberate on who would be appointed.
Through the chair, I'll volunteer to serve on that subcommittee.
Thank you. I also was determined that I would be serving on the subcommittee, given that as being president of the board, my years in experience. So thank you, Trustee Shabaheen, for offering as well. But I want to give an opportunity if anybody else. Okay, and so we will. Yes.
How many people do you need? How many board members do you need?
2.
Then it's fine. You and Ms. Tamara.
Okay, so the subcommittee will be comprised of Trustee Shabaheen and myself. Thank you very much. The next thing I would like to establish with the collective board is the timeline. So we have a holiday break for Thanksgiving and we have a winter break in December. That's makes it a little bit more challenging. I think the technical date that Trustee Fitch resigned was the 22nd. So I believe we have probably up until the 20th or 22nd, worst case scenario, for us to be able to make a decision on who we would appoint. When I think about the timeline, I think we need space to advertise, to allow people to apply, to give the subcommittee enough time to go through applicants and review and contact applicants. And after that, we're going to be interviewing them publicly. I think it's important that we give ourselves enough space to do a second round of interviews if the board determines they need to do that. We don't know how many applicants we're going to receive, right? It could be anywhere between 3 applications to 100 applications, who knows, right? We don't know what the interest is yet. So if we have a lot of applicants that are qualify, I feel like it's important for us to give us enough space to be able to designate someone in time in case we need a follow-up meeting. You know, a unique situation we're dealing with is there's 4 members, not 5, which means that if there's a 2-2, you know, there's nobody to break the tie, right? So that's why I want to give enough time for us to do a follow-up interview if needed. If we, in the first round of interviews, we determine that, you know, the majority cannot get behind one candidate. So that is the only information I will add as we consider the timeline. So we could post the application, all related information by Monday morning, because we do need to review the application and see what we would like to add to it. So that would be, I believe, the first of Monday, or the 2nd of November, or the first. I think it'll be the 2nd of November. And we can have the majority of the month of November be the time for people to read about it, to apply. And then maybe the last week of November, the subcommittee will screen any interested parties. And then the first week of December, we interview. And then we'll know if we need another interview that we can schedule for the second week of December or whenever. So that is a proposal, but this is a group discussion. So please share any feedback to that tentative timeline and share any concern or if support of that.
Through the chair, that timeline sounds good. I just want to clarify what you mean by the last week of November. So you're saying the last full week that goes through the 28th, and then including that 29th and 30th as the first week of December, yes? Meaning that's when we'd be reviewing applicants, the week of November 30th?
Yeah, the week of November 23rd, to give people about 3 weeks, because we would want the interviews, the first round of interviews at least. I mean, maybe we only need one interview, and I don't want to scare everybody. We're just going to have a series of interviews, but yes, that's what I would suggest. But if you have other ideas, please share.
So again, starting reviewing applicants, that subcommittee reviewing applications the week of
the 23rd.
Got it. Okay. I think that's fine. Yeah.
Then, yeah.
I think that's appropriate. 3 weeks of advertising and accepting applications.
And I see that it says November 23rd is Thanksgiving break. Staff is off during. We only need the applications. I think you guys get off the 20th or 21, 22. We need the application. The ones that are going to be doing the work as far as screening will be Trustee Chabot, Mahim, and I. So staff won't be expected to be on call or be working during that week. And then we can schedule interviews for the first week of December.
And Trustee Polito, if I might add one additional fact, you might have stated, in which case I apologize. Owing to just sort of the way the education code is written, any sort of new trustees who are elected would be their terms would essentially begin on the second Friday in December, which is to say December 11th. So if you're wanting to deal with sort of the team you currently have, you certainly want to have the process done by no later than December 11th, 2020.
Right. And I do also want to announce that Trustee Wilson and Trustee Gaona will be fulfilling their roles through the December 10th meeting.
Yes.
Which means we will have a special session to swear in new board members and any appointed member. Because our meeting date falls a day before, which is on the 10th, and 11th is the day they legally take office. So council let us know about that, and we're gonna have to change that moving forward, that that will be the case. So Trustee Wilson, Trustee Gaona, whether Trustee Gaona gets reelected or not, and as Trustee Wilson decide not to run, they will be a part of the meeting for December 10th, and new board members will have a special session after the 11th to be sworn in. We will reorganize the board in that meeting as well with the new board members, and then have a regular session in January. So I did want to make that quick announcement so you get an idea, because some of us might be thinking we normally would swear board members in the first meeting in December. And John was like, well, technically you guys can't. So we're like, oh, okay, well, good to know.
So Madam President, I was wondering if I couldn't maybe take what you've said so far and maybe sort of put it in the form of a motion that I think sort of tracks what you.
Can I interrupt, President Polito? Sorry. Antonio Lopez, who tried to speak earlier, has returned and raised his hand again. I just wanted to point that out. I don't know what the pleasure of the board is regarding his comments.
What is the pleasure of the board?
I think he should be allowed to speak. I think it's a technical problem that we have to really resolve.
Someone's like, I'm doing my best.
Well,
I know, but the
It's-
same thing
it's-
happened at the board meeting.
yeah, it's connectivity on the other end.
Yeah.
But I'm going to promote Antonio. And you can speak now.
Hello, can everyone hear me again?
Yes.
Yeah, my apologies. I was in the middle, calling you, and then my phone died, and I'm charging it now. So it was an issue on my end. But thank you for giving me the floor to speak. I'm not sure because the phone was off and what part of the meeting you are now. But I just want to make a brief comment that since we are so close to the elections, it may seem economically viable and makes more sense to just have the person who is third on the elections to be provisionally elected to be on the board, because I imagine that it'd be fairly costly to have a special election. And because we're so close to the presidential one, and given that our board and our city as well are strapped for funds, it only makes sense to just kind of tag them on to whatever election we have, which is so close. So I just want to make that humble 2 cents. Again, thank you so much for giving me the moment to just put in my opinion, and I look forward to whatever the board decides currently is the best judgment.
Thank you for your comment. All right. I believe, John, you were going to make a suggestion about how we make this into an action.
Yes, President Polito, I was suggesting maybe I could take what you've said so far and maybe put it in the form of a motion that just to make sure, one, it's tracking kind of your sort of intent, and then something at least for the board to consider by way of a motion, and perhaps it would be even your motion. But it sounded like you were sort of suggesting a motion to direct the district and district staff to move forward with the necessary actions to fill the existing vacancy on the board through a provisional appointment, and to appoint trustees Shobomahim and trustee Polito to a subcommittee to facilitate the application process, all pursuant to board bylaw 9223.
Through the chair.
Yes, that sounds correct.
Chat.
Now, one of us has to repeat that entire thing. Yes.
I said, I don't know, we got mixed up. I said, did you want to send that through the chat so we could get that right? I'm just kidding.
I think I wrote some notes, so I'm going to attempt to do the motion. So I'm entertaining a motion, and I move to approve the board's direction to the district staff to fill in posts of the vacancy at the board level, and to do a provisional appointment and have that be the notice, and to also appoint a subcommittee made up of trustee Polito and trustee Shobomahim. I think I covered everything. I
That's right.
fast. Gotta write everything down. Okay, so that is the motion.
Now you need a second.
Thank you.
second.
Roll call, please.
President Polito,
Aye.
Vice President Wilson,
Aye.
Trustee Guyona,
Aye.
Trustee Shobomahim.
Aye.
All right, motion carries 4-0. Thank you all for making the time. We have gotten through our agenda fairly fast. It is 5:40. And now the work begins. Trustee Shobomahim, you'll be hearing from me very shortly, and I'll be sharing a lot of information with you. And yes, thank you, everybody. So we will adjourn this meeting at 5:39 p.m.
Have a good evening.
Bye.
Thank you, John.
Bye.
Thank you, Trustee. Thanks, David.